Reed here. What's going on, everybody? It's a pleasure to see you again. So today we're going to have a discussion on the amygdala, and the amygdala is a very important part of the brain, um, and it's important for us to know its structure, its function, and things like that. So I'm going to give us a few minutes to let a few more people come in, then I'll begin. But I promise you, I'll try not to go over 20 minutes for these. So let's give us a few minutes and let other people come in. Hey guys, Reed here. So today's discussion is going to be on the amygdala. Amygdala, let me give you an image of it too. This is a roughly almond-shaped mass of gray matter. Gray matter, yeah, cell bodies. Gray matter inside each cerebral hemisphere involved in the experience of emotions, right?
Amygdala.
Amygdala. Great. Let me show you an image of this. Okay. So here, we viewed the hippocampus yesterday, and here's the hippocampus. This is the structure here, and the amygdala is the cluster of nerve endings, gray body here at the tip of the hippocampus here. And this is responsible for attaching emotions to the memories, right? Hippocampus, declarative memory, only the facts, and more like spatial orientation. Like if you're walking around Walmart for the first time, you'll still be able to find where the donuts are. That's that spatial orientation. Remember, in our last discussions that the hippocampus had a vulnerability to things like cocaine because cocaine caused inflammation. And the inflammation opening up the blood-brain barrier, everything in a serum gets in and nothing works well. And just repeating bouts of the inflammation and the swelling and things like that due to cocaine issues. And so it's the impairment in the encoding process in the hippocampus that basically failure in their process prevents persons from getting the information into the networks of their brain. For example, if the story you're listening to contains 10 pieces, you want your hippocampus to encode 10 separate pieces. And after it encodes 10 separate pieces, then now your prefrontal cortex has all the individual pieces to put together to assemble into a whole, right? But if the story had 10 pieces and you only got 3 of the pieces into your network, then your prefrontal cortex is going to render reality just only based upon those 3 items. And that's going to be a different reality compared to the reality that's rendered with all the items there. And that's why this hippocampus is so important. And failure in the encoding process due to things that injure like cocaine, we looked at PCP, we looked at ecstasy, and we looked at LSD and things like that and how they all damage this, interferes with this section. But the amygdala is the structure that puts the emotion, that attaches the emotional experience onto the memories. Let's see here. Okay. What do they do? Fear is the main emotion that the amygdala is known to control. That's why your amygdala is so important for survival. It processes things you see in here and uses the inputs to learn what's dangerous. If you encounter something similar in the future, your amygdala will cause you to feel fear or similar emotions, right? And that's good to know that you have some memory of your experiences in the past so that hopefully you can use that to avoid in the future. Sounds well. Um, However, it contributes to more than just anxiety and fear. Look, aggression, learning through reward and punishment, handling and using implicit memory, which allows you to remember how to do certain things without remembering how you've learned them, like riding the bike or tying your shoes. Social communications, emotions relating to parenting or caregiving, emotions connected to memory. Yeah. So look here. So let me go here to Grok and let me see, explain. Okay. So let me see, explain the structure and function. And then I want to go into the networking and then also the receptor profiles on the amygdala. Because if we know the receptor profiles and we believe this is hyperactivity is leading to the overexpression of aggression and things like that, then we want to know exactly what medications to pinpoint that amygdala, right? Yeah. So the amygdala is a small almond-shaped cluster of nuclei in the brain's temporal lobe, primarily known for its role in processing emotions, especially fear and anxiety. It acts as an emotional hub, rapidly evaluating sensory input to detect threats and trigger appropriate responses. Here's the breakdown of its key function. Emotional processing. The amygdala assigns emotional significance to experiences, particularly fear, anger, and pleasure. It helps you react to emotionally challenging stimuli, like jumping and a loud noise with a familiar face. Ooh, ooh. Hold on one second. Gotta get this. Sorry, folks. Okay. Emotional processing. Okay. So yeah. So this amygdala is very important when you start to see how the emotional shifts and things like this are very important um, structure. So here, fear response and threat detection. Okay, it's critical for the fight or flight response. When it detects danger, like a snake, could be a human snake too. Um, it signals the hypothalamus to release stress hormones like adrenaline, preparing the body for flight and action. This happens via the amygdala's connection to the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to show you a design. They should have a few designs, schematics of how this works. It's very interesting to sort of understand this circuit. But look at this. So it detects something in the environment. It signals the hippocampus. The hippocampus releases adrenaline. And then adrenaline prepares the entire body for a fight, to fight or to flee the situation, fight or flight. All right, next. Memory formation and consolidation. I'm sure you're going to want to record that event and have a lot of details about it. You know, or you ever been into a situation that's emotionally, very emotionally charged, and it seems like time sort of condenses down to like snapshots, like like film reel or something like that. Each snapshot. It seems like, I mean, I'm sure this can help you focus and consolidate information to that extent. It's amazing how this thing works like that. The amygdala enhances memory for emotionally significant events. Emotionally significant events. For example, you're more likely to remember a traumatic event vividly because your amygdala strengthens those neuronal connections working closely with the hippocampus. Yeah, these structures are directly connected to each other. So they have a direct impact on anything, just like emotions and learning. Your teacher, your teacher, your teacher has a lot of impact on how they can impact you. Okay. Social and emotional cues. It helps interpret social signals. Okay, like facial expressions, tone of voice, enabling you to engage others' emotions. Right? Makes sense. Reward and motivation. Reward and motivation. The amygdala also processes positive emotions, contributing to reward seeking behavior by linking stimuli to pleasurable outcomes like food or social bonding. Right. Okay, it operates through two main pathways, low road and high road. Fast, direct route from sensory input to the amygdala for a quick instinctive reaction to potential threats, and the slower path involving the cortex for a conscious evaluation, refining the initial response. That makes sense. The low road is the hardwire road, basically an limbic system. The higher road is the road that has to go through that striatum up to the cortex for processing. Dysfunction in the amygdala is linked to disorders in anxiety, PTSD, and depression, where emotional regulation or threat perception goes awry. Its role is complex, integrating sensory, cognitive, hormonals to shape how we navigate the world emotionally. Very interesting. Let me go through a few of these diagrams here. I think it may be useful. Okay, look at this. Okay. So here's the object, fearful object. So here it comes in, and through the visual part, it goes to the amygdala. Okay. And the visual cortex here to the amygdala. And then there's a response. There's a response here. So this amygdala is connected to this thalamus here, and then that visual directly to that visual cortex. They send the information goes there, and then there's a response out. This was very simple diagram to understand how it's functioning. Let me see if they have. Some of these diagrams are are really nice. Okay, here's the amygdala here. Right there, here's the hippocampus. Okay. Okay, for now, let me see if I have any questions. Hey, guys, how's it going? Hey, Max, how's it going? Battler, how's it going, Battler? iHash, how's it going, buddy? iHash. Okay, hi, Ashar. How's it going, buddy? What happens in the brain when the amygdala is overactive? PTSD, panic disorder, anxiety, anxiety disorder, any apprehensiveness, withdrawn, things like that. Um, hey, Moeen, how's it going? Why is the amygdala called the brain's fear center? It's the it processes all the emotions, but we have a predilection to be to focus more, be attached to more, or assign priority to the extremes of the emotions, the very good, the very bad, things like that. Hey, Dr. Liz, Mohammed, how's it going, buddy? Let's see here. So here, could it be that being born fearless is nature ways of keeping us open to learning, and fear only arrives later as a protective mechanisms? Yeah, I thought about that often. I don't know the answer to that question, but I thought about that often. Um, um, you're supposed to live fearlessly, right? But then you get consequences to those actions and things like that, and those consequences sort of help you refine how you're going to dive off the next cliff. So instead of diving off the next cliff head first, then maybe you dive off of your foot first, or next just tumble down the side. Next, then climb down the side, and then next just don't go down at all. All of those are goals that you set to try to, let's say, get down this mountain. Different methods, but over a time, after getting hit several times and falling several times and getting busted up several times, you learn not to even go down in the first place, right? I hope you understood that. Okay. Anyway, okay. Let's say Umber. Hey, Umber, how's it going, buddy? Uh, can therapy actually erase fear memories or just suppress them? That's good. That's a good question. I'll have to look that up. But I know healing has more to do with, from my perspective. Each one has his or her own, but I think mine works for me, and I think I do a pretty good job at the work that I do. But it's the process, become the process of actually ignoring the amygdala, right? Um, and it's based on the fact that the past doesn't exist. Right? And so, if you were to focus in the past, it's sort of like entering a delusional world because the past doesn't exist. All right, and then sort of like in the future doesn't exist. And often you see people stuck in either relationships or places or situations that existed in the past, but they no longer exist right now. But then they're attached to them, those things, as if they do exist, right? And those relationships existed in the past, but they don't exist now. And because it doesn't exist now, there's no point in paying attention to it, right? And so all the attention focus on those things are just more opportunities for you to torture yourself. Um, because when you upload those memories, they exist more like virtual experiences. And when you upload it, it's not only the memory, you upload the entire experience and you suffer the experience every time. And I just don't see any point in going through that. Not at all. Particularly if the past doesn't exist. And because you can't get something from nothing, then all of those emotions are simply triggered by the programming. But the reality doesn't exist. But the mechanisms to trigger the programming, is still there. It's like the skeleton. It's like the energy around the situation is still there to zap you if you focus on it. But the whole situation doesn't exist no more. I hope that makes sense. So next, let me see. Let me search here and um, search for the receptors on the. Let me see if they're networks, the pathways. Okay. Explain the networks of pathways. Okay. The amygdala receives and sends signals through several bidirectional pathways, allowing, well, this is the first time I've heard of the direct bidirectional pathways. Um, Allowing it to process input from sensory, visceral, and cognitive areas while influencing behavioral and autonomic outputs. That's interesting. So, three categories of inputs: sensory, visceral and cognitive, and then it dumps two outputs. Wow. Behavioral meaning the behavioral and autonomic responses. Wow. So behavior meaning voluntary or involuntary motor activity, and then autonomic responses to support the motor activities. These pathways often combine afferent and efferent output fibers, enabling rapid emotional responses like the fight or flight reaction. This is really amazing. Okay, the afferent patterns. Okay, yeah, afferent, yeah, efferent, afferent input, efferent output. Okay, the sensory input. Okay, then we have input for the hippocampus. That makes sense, right? The hippocampus is going to give the declarative memory, right? The prefrontal cortex is where it assembles those pieces of declarative memory and come up with a conceptual whole, abstract reasoning. So I'm sure the conclusion, the result of all of the processing from the data in the hippocampus creates something that's abstract, and input should be fed to the amygdala so it can understand what this is. If all the individual pieces of information equals a lion in front of you, then a lion in front of you is going, once it recognizes a lion in front of you, then is going to recruit the the efferent. The sure, that makes sense. The amygdala pathway here. Okay, okay, let me go back here. The sensory input, the amygdala received direct projections from the sensory regions of the thalamus and cortex, including the visual, auditory, olfactory, and gustatory information. So basically, all the sensory inputs. For instance, the lateral nucleus of the amygdala acts as a primary entry point for all these sensory signals, allowing quick detection of potential threats without cortical processing. Okay. And then visceral inputs arrive from the hypothalamus, septo-orbital cortex, and parabrachial nucleus, which helps associate emotions with internal body states like heart rate and arousals. That's very interesting. It's interesting how these things do all this. Okay, hippocampal and prefrontal input. This be interesting. Connections from the hippocampus provide contextual memory information, while input from the prefrontal cortex modulate decision making and emotional regulation. Modulate decision making, that's the abstract nature of the thing to help make a decision. If you saw fangs, if you saw crowd, you saw all of those bits together is a lion, right? And I think you're going to be able to respond to that without even processing it automatically. It's amazing. Okay, other sources. Okay, afferents from the brainstem. That makes sense. And the basal forebrain enhance the alertness and attention during emotional events. Hmm. I wonder if this other source's afferent has anything to do with like cold plunging when they jump in cold pools and get the afferent stimulation, and it results in the release of like norepinephrine, all the neurotransmitters, and it helps with attention and concentration and things like that. If you ever met these people who cold plunge. They're a unique group of people who would jump in that cold water and stay. But I wonder if that's what they do it for. Okay, next, efferent patterns. Okay, this is external. Ventral amygdalofungal pathway. Fugal pathway. This is one of the three major efferent routes originating primarily from the basolateral to the central nuclei. It flees from the amygdala to targets like the medial dorsal raphe, medial dorsal nuclei of the thalamus, hippocampus, forebrain, brainstem, blah, 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 blah. Of course, you got that. And then this fiber, that fiber, and that fiber. Okay, we got the out. We did all the fibers. All right, broader networks involving the amygdala. Okay, the limbic system, reward network. Yeah. Okay, anxiety and fear network, cognitive control network. The limbic network. As a core limbic structure, the amygdala interacts with the hippocampus. Makes sense. For memory consolidation, the hypothalamus for hormonal and autonomic control, and the BSTN, I don't know what that is. This network underpins emotional learning, great, such as Pavlovian conditioning. That's the limbic system, the reward network. Okay, great. I'm up to 26 minutes now. Let me change this and move to the next section. The receptor profile. Okay, explain the receptor profile on the amygdala. And I bet you when we go through the amygdala, it's going to have the same receptor profiles of what everything we just went over, right? Here at the top, let's see here. Yeah. Glutamate receptors, right? But GABA receptors, right? Remember, glutamate receptors are present throughout almost all the tissues and cells in the body. And glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter. So when you activate glutamate, you turn the entire organism on. Same thing, GABA is present throughout all the tissues and cells, right? Now, when you activate GABA, GABA has inhibitory tone. So it turns like the entire organism off. So glutamate, everything on, GABA, everything off. And it's the balance between these two systems that you want to achieve, right? The amygdala may be associated with excessive glutaminergic activity. Remember when we went over the substances, cocaine, LSD, PSP, all those things, and they cause glutamate hyperactivity? Where here it is right here. The same ionotropic glutamate receptors we reviewed, and the same metabotropic glutamate receptors. Same story here. Next, here are the GABA receptors, the main inhibitory. Look, they even broke it down. The GABA A receptors and the GABA B receptors. Look at this. There's a difference in here. These ionic receptors mediate fast inhibitory transmission. And look, these here, they mediate the slower inhibitory transmissions. Fast, slow. So there's the glutamate receptor there. And so I often use things like Namenda. Namenda is one of the medications that we use in dementia and things like that, and it causes down regulation of that glutamate activity. So when I have patients that I believe if I need to hit those glutamate receptors, I try to target them with Namenda. And I use these medications in agitation, combative, and aggressiveness all the time. Here's the GABA receptors. Remember, so the GABA receptors are responses to benzodiazepines. So in the case of rage, agitation, combativeness, aggressiveness, things like that, we want to go with benzodiazepines. And we give the benzodiazepines IM or IV in an urgent or emergent situation because we want to avoid the first pass metabolism so they can get more of the medication on the dose. And so, but these are the receptors on that amygdala that we're targeting when we give the PRN. And we're targeting specifically when we give the benzodiazepines, and we're targeting specifically the GABA receptors, right? GABA, activate GABA, inhibitory tone, try to get balance between that glutamate and GABA system. Next, same thing. Remember the dopamine receptors we went over? Remember that mesocortical pathway, hyperactivity, excessive dopaminergic activity, hypoactivity, hypoactive mesocortical pathway, hypoactive dopamine activity. Remember the mesolimbic pathway, right? Remember the basal ganglia and the highly dopaminergic innervation and the loss in that leads to Parkinson's disease, and damage to that direct pathway leads to Huntington's disease and things like that. That's a D2 blockade right here. So the typical anti in the case with rage, combativeness, agitation, aggressiveness, that's why we give the antipsychotics, right? In the case of very severe agitation, we can go with things like Haldol and Thorazine in the IM or IM form, but these are the actual receptors that we're trying to target there, right? Serotonergic agents. All right. So here we have the serotonin blockades. Now remember, for the typical antipsychotics, they primarily block this D2 receptors, and they really don't target the serotonin and norepinephrine receptors, but the atypical antipsychotics do. So the atypical ones, all of them have target serotonin and norepinephrine receptors. Right. So even in the case when patients with panic disorder, anxieties, PTSD, we still want to consider those atypical antipsychotics because they'll give us benefit. They'll give us benefit here at this dopamine 1, dopamine 2 receptor, serotonin, norepinephrine, and also it may hit the histamine receptors also. But we can use atypical antipsychotics to target the aggression and combativeness associated with the hyperactive amygdala. Cannabinoid receptors, I guess weed, CB1 receptors, these are highly expressed, okay, where they modulate synaptic transmitting by inhibiting neurotransmitter release. So that's how it works. Inhibit neurotransmitter release, is that how weed works? Endocannabinoids fine-tune amygdala circuits, particularly in stress-related content. You kidding me? Okay, yeah, neuropeptides and then hormones and acetylcholine receptors. Okay, so I think that's all I have from now, and it's at 32 minutes. I was supposed to go only 20 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this now. But if you have any questions for me, you can just leave them in the comment section. I can see if I can answer it for you. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and I hope I wasn't too long. So you guys take care, and I'll see you later. Ciao, guys.